hey there, welcome to your Positive Energy Recharge. I am Jade Sterling, your women's health coach and nurse. I am here to help you to balance your hormones, master your emotions, and live a life you love. And today we're talking about emotional pain versus physical pain, because the last couple of weeks, actually, I've had my own experience of physical pain where I've had this injury in my leg. I'm going to tell you all about it. And I've realized how that correlates with emotional pain and how the two, if actually experienced at the same time, can increase the intensity of each. What do I mean by that? In order to explain this as well, I'm going to be highlighting a tool that I use to be able to help women what I call move from over here, which is a perimenopausal hot mess where you're feeling out of control of your emotions. You can't watch a television commercial without crying. You can't just tell your kids to do their shoes 10 times in a row without screaming and losing the plot. And you just can't communicate with your husband or even function at work sometimes. To over here where we feel calm and centered and connected with ourselves and with everything else that's happening, regardless of what's actually going on outside of ourselves. But because we feel connected in ourselves, we feel connected in general, and we're able to show up in a way that feels good and that helps us live a truly enjoyable and fulfilling life. So how do we get from here to there? I've talked about this in a couple of other videos. If you go back and you look at the 6 steps for positivity and perimenopausal mastery, it is a process that I teach. It's also a workout for the mind. And I like to explain it like we have lots of tools and we have regimes that we put into place for our physical activity. We put into place strength workouts, cardiovascular workouts. We do yoga, Pilates. We do all kinds of different fitness activities to be able to help keep our physical body strong. And I've explained this in many other videos before, the way I like to explain it, but I'll just give a brief overview again, is that if we're working to make our physical bodies strong, particularly in perimenopause and menopause, when at this time we have a decrease in what's happening in our tissues and our soft tissues, in our cardiovascular state, in our hormone levels, our muscles, in our bone density, there are so many things that are changing and on the decline. In order to keep our muscles strong, to do strength training, we hold dumbbell weights. This is my dumbbell weight. And we hold it and we lift it and we lift it until it burns and it burns and it burns and it burns and it burns the muscle. It deliberately breaks and destroys this muscle, actually very deliberately tears this muscle apart. And then when we put it down and we rest, the muscle realizes that it needs to be stronger in order to be able to cope with that amount of pressure. And so it rebuilds its fibers very quickly and creates a bigger, stronger muscle. And that's how we actually build physical muscle. And of course, this helps not only our musculoskeletal system, but our cardiovascular system, our mental health. It helps with our hormones. It helps with so many things. And so we have these things in place, and we have very clear guidelines for women, particularly over the age of 40, but we don't have that for our minds. And the positive energy circuit is a workout for your mind that I have created to be able to help support you to establish a new baseline for your nervous system, because your nervous system is going to tell your hormones how to show up. Your hormones will respond to whatever state your nervous system is in. So when we're having issues with our hormones, particularly in perimenopause and menopause, it's usually a nervous system problem first and foremost that helps us to not be able to regulate our emotions. And from there, we end up feeling internal turmoil and chaos. And then that is just what we experience inside and outside. So how can we actually keep our mental health in a way that we can keep building strength, we can keep building stability, we can keep building all the good feels that help us to feel good? Well, I've invented the 6-step process to be able to access peace, positivity, and purpose, which is the positive energy circuit. And in that, I teach you, coming back full circle, how to get from here emotional stability, screaming at your kids, disconnect with your husband, not able to relate to anyone in your workplace, to over here where we feel centered, secured, self-assured, in control, a full sense of purpose and peace and fun, which is over here. Once we can get through the peace and find some relief, we can actually find positivity and fun to over here. So go back and have a look at the 6 steps to perimenopausal mastery in the other video to learn a little bit more about the positive energy circuit. You can always find information down in the description below and how you can connect with me. But today I just want to highlight one of the tools that I use to get you from here to there. I'm going to refer to it in relation to physical pain and emotional pain, because having had this experience over the last week, I realized that this is a huge issue. And I know this is a huge issue because I have women who have particular diseases or pathologies or diagnoses that they're trying to deal with and they're struggling with, and they can't quite figure out how to implement some of the work that I do to turn it all around. And I feel like I kind of had this experience in order to be able to shed some light on that a little bit more, a little bit clearer, because we have physical pain. And you've heard me talk before about how our thoughts create our feelings, and our feelings tell our body what to do, and that becomes what we experience in our daily life. Well, the curiosity map is one tool that I use to be able to help you understand how that works. And we use a compass, and I've talked about that in positivity video previously. The positivity model is our compass that we use, and the curiosity map is actually how we get there. But in this particular case, what it is, which is the starting point of the curiosity map, we look at our circumstances. Because what it is, our circumstances of life are neutral. And they just are what they are. And if you see also my recent Tuesday chat with Dr. Paul Jenkins, who is the creator of the positivity model, and he goes into even more detail that it is what it is. And look, when I first heard that, I was like, right, it is what it is. I did not find peace and comfort in that statement. But when you look at it deeper, it is what it is. And what it is are your circumstances, things that are happening. Now, previously I've explained them as things that are happening outside of yourself, that you have no control over. But as I've gone on, even in my journey through my life, but also interacting with more and more clients as this work takes off and seems to be changing lives, I realize that there are circumstances happening on the inside as well that cannot be controlled. And of course, perimenopause is one of those things. We actually don't have control over what our hormones are doing. We don't actually have control over certain other areas of our body and how they're functioning and what they're doing. And that can feel disempowering. That can feel like we're failing. That can also feel like we're betrayed by our body. I think about in an earlier life of mine, in my 20s, I did have a period where I was going through some ill health, and I've shared my stories before about my disordered eating and my inability to be able to make friends with my body. And I was actually, of course, the culprit myself. By not looking after myself, I deteriorated even further. But at the time, I remember thinking that my body was letting me down. My favorite show at the time was the musical Rent. Anybody else? Rent. It was always my dream to actually play the part of Maureen in Rent. If you've seen any of the previous videos too, you'll know that I've had quite a colourful life and career that started in acting and musical theatre. And so this is something that I haven't given up on this particular dream. And I have one particular friend who I keep harassing every couple of years to go, hey, when are we doing Rent? Because he wanted to do it too. So I'll just keep you posted as to when that dream is going to manifest. But at this point, I just sing Over the Moon in my bathroom in the shower, if anybody knows that song. I was obsessed with Red as much as I was in my 20s. Anyhow, there is a line in the opening song that says, how do you document real life when real life's getting more like fiction each day? And then it goes on to red lines, headlines, blow my mind, now this deadline, eviction or pay. It goes on to say, how can you connect in an age where strangers, landlords, lovers, your own blood cells betray? And I remember singing that from the core of my heart, going, yes, my body is betraying me. Everything around me is betraying, everything outside of me and everything inside of me is betraying me. And I look back and I'm actually very grateful for that anger, because it made me go looking for solutions. It made me go looking for reasons. It made me go looking for how I could get out of this pain, which I know is not the path for everyone, but that was for me, and that was actually a blessing. And so the pain that I experienced internally then, I realized had its purpose. But what I did learn from that experience was that there are things that are happening outside. Landlords, lovers, friends, family, colleagues, the weather can betray us at times. When you think back to the video I did about just after Cyclone Alfred swept through my region. Finances, there are certain things outside of us though that are beyond our control. And it's easier to surrender to those things and say, well, those circumstances are neutral. And as Dr. Paul so expertly pointed out, they're only neutral because things could always be better, always, and things could always be worse, always. And so that, by definition, makes it neutral. It's not either of those things. It's not good, it's not bad, it's only what our thoughts do with our circumstances that decide whether it's good or bad. And then that creates our feelings. I'm going to go more into that. But the circumstances being neutral, anything outside of us that are outside our control, but that also includes things that are happening inside of us, like our hormonal changes, like biological changes that we can't control, our bone density decrease, the decrease in our neurons, our nerve cells, our brain cells. There's lots of things that are actually decreasing and dialing down, particularly at this point of our lives, if you're a woman over 40, which is most likely if you are watching this video. And if you're not, there's still going to be lots of things happening for you that are outside of your control on the inside. Then it comes to disease. And I see lots of women with polycystic ovarian syndrome. This is a nasty one, because basically you have lots of cystic cysts on your ovaries. That creates a syndrome that interferes with your normal hormone function and regulation, and the way that that actually manifests in your life can be in lots of things, but women do experience lots of pain. They do experience headaches, they do experience erratic mood swings, they do experience irregular cycles. There is, and look, I've seen it, I feel like I've seen it in its nastiest form, particularly in women's health clinics when women have come in for severe treatment of their symptoms, and it can lead to severe anxiety and depression because of the hormone fluctuations that we cannot control. So again, that is a circumstance, and that is a circumstance that is neutral. And I do get some kickback with that sometimes, and people say, well, it doesn't feel neutral. Of course it doesn't feel neutral, because you have certain thoughts about it. And that's where we have to look at and differentiate between physical pain, which is a circumstance of life that we cannot control, versus the emotional pain that we feel when we feel out of control and that we have no control. So this might seem to be a little bit of a contradiction, and sometimes people say, but I don't have control. But you find that once you can actually address the emotional pain and get that under control, the physical pain and the physical symptoms actually decrease. Because when we dial up our emotional pain, our nervous system dials up. And in the case of pain, certainly with me and my leg over the last week, it increased pain and sensitivity, and it increased the tension that I was feeling and decreased my ability to be able to meet it where it was at and then cope and show up in my life where I could just feed my family, brush my teeth, wash my hair without constantly thinking and being overwhelmed and overcome by the physical pain. So once we understand that circumstances are neutral, that is the first place to start. And that is the first step of the curiosity map. I'm sure I've taken you through the 5 steps of a curiosity map in a previous video. I have to go back and look at it for sure. And they're not really steps in a way because they are not chronological in order. They don't have to be followed in this particular order to be able to achieve the result of creating a better experience for yourself. But there's 5 pieces to the curiosity map that we really must look at. The first is that circumstances are neutral. What it is what it is. And in the case of the client that I had a couple of weeks ago with polycystic ovarian syndrome, it might not feel like it's neutral because of all of the symptoms that it's causing, but it is neutral. It's only because you have a thought about it that makes it good or a bad experience. What actually happened with my leg, before I go on and tell you the rest of the steps of the curiosity map, I'll just give you a little brief summary, is, wow, look, it goes back to a couple of years ago. I had a roller skating accident. When my kids started learning their bikes, I couldn't keep up with them because they were going so quickly, but then I couldn't get on a bike of my own because then getting on and getting off wasn't enough time to be able to catch them. I figured that if I put on a pair of roller skates, I'd be able to catch them, catch up with them, and catch them. And I love roller skating. I've been roller skating since I was 10 years old. So it was a double win. Might make that a triple win. It was fun. And so I was roller skating with my kids in the park, and I have continued to do so up until this day. But on this particular day, I was going down a hill, which I had a lot of confidence on my skates. But this particular day, I didn't know in this park that there was like a speed hump at the bottom of the hill. I don't know if you can imagine what happened now. I went up, hit the speed bump, and went airborne and flew through the air. And I remember that moment of thinking everything goes in slow motion. And I thought, if I land with my feet, surely I'm going to lose my skates underneath me. They're going to slip, they're going to slide, and I'm still going to land on my bottom. So I was trying to think of the best way. I was thinking, can I do a commando roll to the right because there was grass on my right side? But my brain wasn't quite quick enough in the slow motion of my airborne flight, and I ended up in a seated position. We call it Dandasana in yoga, where you're literally sitting with your legs straight out in front of you, and my bottom hit square on the concrete, coccyx smashed into the earth, and I felt the vibration all the way up my spine, and I couldn't move. Was scared for a moment, as you can imagine, once you hit the concrete with your back, that with that impact and with that force, that I was terrified that I'd done some serious damage. I'm a nurse, right? So I thought, what would I do if someone came into, if I witnessed this here in the park with someone else, or if someone came into ED, and I'd be putting them on their back. I'd be putting them on their back and elevating their legs. So that's what I'm going to do with myself. I don't know whether that was the right thing to do at the time, but that was what my brain was telling me. But I did. I lay down right in the middle of the path. There were people skating and riding their bikes and walking all around me, but this is where I placed myself until my son eventually came over and said, "Oh my God, Mum, what are you doing? Are you okay?" And I'm like, "I'm okay. I'm just collecting myself." And I had this lower back pain for a couple of years, to be honest. Now, I thought it was my coccyx, and my lower back pain was manageable. Excuse me. And so I thought if I was to go and get any imaging, to go and x-ray or scan what was happening down there, and they said everything's fine, but you've got bits of whatever floating around the place, or you've got something that's out of alignment, there's nothing we can do. I figured that that was going to be worse for my brain. So I decided against getting imaging, and I don't necessarily recommend this for anybody else, but this is what I decided to do for myself. I thought that if my brain knew that there was something wrong but I couldn't fix it, it would be worse for my mental health, and then I would start telling my body, you can't do all these things, and it would restrict me, and that my ability would get worse. So between my osteopath, my acupuncturist, and my yoga therapy that I do for myself, I was able to manage my back pain for a good 12 months. I still had to carry a cushion everywhere I went because that's the coccyx, right? Once it bruises, oh, it's painful. Anybody have that experience? So you've got to sit on cushions everywhere you go, and you can't sit for too long. Anyway, it did eventually clear up. I didn't have to carry cushions for the rest of my life, just for 12 months or so. And I still had this dull lower back pain. So I decided that maybe it was irresponsible to not investigate, just to make sure. And so I did some investigations and everything was fine, just saying. But I still had this dull lower back pain that I kind of aggressively attacked with yoga therapy. But after 6 months of doing intense yoga on that particular part of my body, the back pain completely disappeared, which was amazing. But I started getting this front pain, this pain in the front of my left leg. And I couldn't quite figure out what that was. And it would come and it would go and it would twinge and it would tweak. And sometimes it would be very painful. And again, I had it investigated. No scans, but an x-ray and ultrasound, nothing came up. So I figured that I'd just pulled a muscle, I'd done something wrong. But 6 months this pain lasted, and it was getting worse and worse and worse, to the point where I was working at hospital in the home, which I still do, in the public health system on the weekends, where I go to people's homes and I help them with antibiotics or wound care or anything that they need where they're sick and they still should be in hospital, but they're stable enough to be home, so we go and treat them in the home. Went to this patient's house and I couldn't get out of the car. I couldn't actually physically get out of the car, and I was like, oh, something's wrong here. Again, had it checked out, absolutely nothing wrong. It seemed to be in my head. And the more that I thought about that things were going wrong and the pain that I was in, the worse it got. And I remember thinking to myself, this is why you didn't want to do any of the investigations in the first place. But then I had to remind myself, the investigations were clear. We call it NAD in the medical field, no abnormalities detected. I had a few degenerative changes that are quite normal for a 47-year-old woman, but nothing that would indicate why I was feeling this pain. And the tension, the sensitivity, and the pain just increased and increased until I felt like I would never walk again. And it was really scary. And I realized that I had to just pull my lens back and take a step back and have a look at what was going on. My circumstance was that I was experiencing physical pain, and my thought about that, which is the next step of the curiosity map, my thought about that was, this is bad. Something bad is going on here. And of course, if you have that thought, something's bad, your nervous system dials up. It needs to protect you and defend you and keep you safe. So you go into fight, flight, freeze, and fawn mode, and everything tenses up. And as I said, my symptoms got worse, and I was less able to walk and move without pain. And how was that making me feel? I was feeling so anxious. I was feeling anxious, and I was feeling terrified, and I was feeling scared, and I was feeling uncertain about my future. Now, I was coaching, as I said, a woman with polycystic ovarian syndrome, PCOS for short, just a few weeks ago. And I remember saying to her, the pain that you're experiencing, we can't take that away. But do you want to experience the emotional pain as well? If you actually come to terms with the fact that you can't get rid of your symptoms, how do you want to feel about having PCOS with lots of pain and headaches and mood swings? And of course, she said, well, I just don't want it, which is fair enough, but you can't change it. So the thought that I don't want it is not helpful. And I realized that that's what I was saying to myself. I don't want this. This is interfering with my life. It's not helpful. It's happening. There's nothing I can do about it. The fact that it shouldn't be this way, it should be better, back to the positivity model, makes me feel worse, dials up my nervous system. My brain can't find solutions. It also increases my symptoms. Same thing was happening for my PCOS lady. And in the end, I said to her, how do you want to feel in this experience? Now, we can feel, if I gave you a platter of feelings, because that exists. There is a plethora of feelings that you can choose from. You can choose peace. You can choose empowerment. You can choose motivation. You can choose resentment. You can choose anger. You can choose neglect. You can choose frustration. You can choose your feelings. Now, of course, there are certain situations that we want to choose negative emotion because that's actually going to be helpful for us. In certain cases where things are happening, perhaps that interfere with human rights, or perhaps things that interfere with your morals and ethics and values, we might want to choose negative emotion when it comes to those things to be able to just remind us we are not making choices. We want to make choices that are in line with our morals and ethics and values. Sometimes we need anger for motivation. Sometimes we need frustration to help us move us out of a difficult situation. There are negative emotions that actually serve purpose. Even anxiety is a signal to the body. Something's not right here. Pay attention. Become aware. Let's figure out what's going on. We can choose negative emotion as well, and sometimes we should and we need to, but we can also choose positive emotion. Now, if you're in a state like I am in, what I would say 9 out of 10 pain, where I talk about it with nursing, we say to people, if 0 was no pain at all and 10 was the worst possible pain ever imaginable, where would you rate your pain from 0 to 10? And often if people are experiencing high amounts of pain, they will usually rate it at like a 6 or a 7. Because they can understand 10 being the worst possible pain ever. Well, it's not childbirth. To me, childbirth was a 10. 0 being absolutely nothing. Well, that's not, they can't actually put that into context in their current circumstance. So that's not relatable. So it's got to be somewhere in the middle. But usually they don't put it as a 5 because a 5 seems to be something that maybe you could tolerate and then carry on, but not in this case. This particular client of mine had polycystic ovarian syndrome and was experiencing 6 to 7 out of 10 pain. I would say I was experiencing 9, but again, it's not a pain I experience on a regular basis. So if it comes short, sharp, and infrequent, it can feel like it's a lot more than it is. That was my experience though, and I was sticking to it. And pain is so subjective, but pain is pain, and we do not have any right to actually have a judgment on whether somebody is in pain or not. If someone's in pain and they say it's 9 out of 10, it's 9 out of 10 for them. Same with 6, 7, or 2. I think about my mum who had chronic rheumatoid arthritis for the last 40 years of her life. And she was in pain all the time. And she would always say, it's a 2, it's a 2, it's a 2. But when I was experiencing my leg pain, I wondered whether my 9 out of 10 pain was her too. And she was just existing with it because she realized that it wasn't going to go away. And she wanted to make peace with it and get on with her life. She was able to dial it down. But who knows? Because it's subjective depending on the person. But in this case of pain, I had to also decide if I wanted to be really angry that this shouldn't be happening, it should be better, that this wasn't how it was supposed to be. This wasn't how I wanted it to be. This wasn't how my week was supposed to go. I had a very busy week. I was working a lot. I was trying to help people. I was trying to look after my family. I was just trying to do things that I felt were really worthwhile, that this leg pain was getting in the way of. And I had to say to myself, okay, the circumstance of what it is physical pain. Just like I advised my PCOS client, how do you want to feel about it? Now, of course, as I said, she didn't necessarily want to feel empowered. at this point, because she didn't even want it. I certainly didn't want my leg pain. But can we find a place of peace with it, where we can access some relief, just enough to tell our nervous system that we don't need to experience emotional pain on top of the physical pain. We don't need to dial up and increase the symptoms, that we're safe, that this circumstance is what it is, and we're going to get through it and we're going to dial it down. But this is where we need to go back and look at our thoughts. So the circumstance of what it is the first step of the curiosity map. The thought is what we have about it. The feeling is created by the thought that we have about it. When we have a thought that we believe, it releases chemicals into our bloodstream. That becomes energy in motion, literally emotion. And those emotions become what we feel. So that's the very subtle difference between an emotion and a feeling. The emotion is like the physiological reaction that happens on the inside, and the feeling is what we actually experience. And then the feelings tell our body what to do. So if we're feeling anger, if we're feeling resentment, if we're feeling fear, if we're feeling terrified, anxious and scared, nervous system's going to dial up and go, right, we need to increase pressure to make sure we can survive. The blood flow moves from the front of the brain. The front of the brain is where our thinking part resides. It helps us find solutions to our problems. But the blood flow leaves the building at the time that our nervous system dials up. It moves to the back of the brain. Its only job then is to just protect you and defend you in fight, flight, freeze or fawn mode. That's not particularly helpful when you're already in physical pain, which is your circumstance. And I will just run through the last of the curiosity map just to give you the outline of that. When we have our circumstances, our thoughts create our feelings tell our body what to do, and that's how we behave. Step 4 is how we behave. And how we behave and show up is how we experience our lives. This is the internal experience of how we experience our day-to-day life. And what we actually have to be able to express what we have processed throughout the process of these 5 steps. And that is actually an acronym. What the facts behind everything. I tried to keep it G-rated, but I still want to emphasize what the facts behind everything. What it is, our circumstances, our thoughts, feelings, behaviors, and our experience. What's the facts behind everything? This is the curiosity map. And so speaking to my PCOS client and then looking at it myself, how did I want to feel? I was thinking, yeah, she was on track. I just want to feel relief and peace at this point. What thoughts do I need to help generate a feeling of peace? First of all, it was accepting that I was in physical pain and it wasn't going anywhere. The other thought that was helpful for me was to understand that this was actually an old wound. I told you my roller skating accident happened years ago, actually. It moved into back pain. It then moved around to the front of my leg. And I realized that this is my body over the course of years realigning itself. When they could find nothing wrong, I went to a bodywork therapist that I see every so often, who I just love and always has time for me. I'm so grateful for her. She actually was the first person to, out of a doctor, an osteo, a physio, who really put her hands on my leg to have a feel. I think, of course, that the other practitioners didn't want to cause me pain, but she wasn't afraid of causing me pain. And she went in there to my leg and found the points where it was extremely painful. And she figured out, which just made total sense to me at the time, that there was a ligament that was moving. Sorry if anyone else has like goosebumps when I'm thinking about this, even though I'm a nurse. There was a ligament moving over 2 muscle groups at the front of my leg, and that had actually pulled, because it was like there was a bruise on the inside of these muscle groups, but plus the ligament was moving. This was causing instability of that muscle group in the front of my left leg, and of course my pelvis, which just continuously moves around because of my flexy, stretchy joints that I've had my whole life, but also particularly since childbirth, and my core is not so strong. So she quite matter-of-factly said, "Oh, you've got a moving ligament that just keeps to be slipping. It's affecting this muscle group, which is causing you pain." And once I knew what it was, and of course I can go and get an MRI to just make sure that that's the case, and I do have a referral for an orthopedic surgeon. My GP did, because he was like, "I don't know what to do with you, you need an ortho." But in this case, I decided that made complete sense, what she was saying, and that again, I could either surgically intervene and have that ligament put back into place, but if it's slipping in and out, then perhaps there is a possibility to be able to keep it stable by going back and working on my core. And I have been, and I can only say that the pain has dramatically decreased. Could that also be from where my head is at, and my thoughts know that there's something more logical behind it, and the fear has gone, and the tension and sensitivity has decreased as well in my body. It's all of that. So the thought for me was knowing that there was nothing wrong at the time, but at the same time understanding that this was supposed to be happening for me. This was not my body betraying me like I thought in my 20s. This was my body working for me. It was trying to fix itself. It was saying, right, well, we had this back issue. We're going to move into the hip, and we're going to move down into the front, and we're going to resolve this. It's now actually moving all the way down my leg, which, if I didn't know in my mind, was the muscle groups trying to get back into alignment after probably years of compensating. Perhaps I'd be freaking out about that too. But I'm feeling like it's all working for me. And that thought, it's working for me, has given me the peace and the relief that I need. But actually, I had a moment there a couple of days ago where I felt empowered by the situation. My body is taking charge, and it is looking out for me. Now, that was able to get me to a place where I could change the feeling and how I was showing up. How I was showing up was in ways that were more beneficial. It wasn't just trying to avoid the pain. It was trying to manage the problem in the first place. From a place of anxiety and fear and anger, I was just taking pain relief, and I was in bed, and I was angry at the world. And I was trying to avoid it, and I was trying to hide from it, and I was stopped doing my daily duties, cancelled everything, and felt miserable. But from a place of feeling peace, I was able to start to do the core exercises that I know that I needed to do. Actually got some help in that department as well, and working towards building my body better, bigger, stronger, and helping it in its healing process, knowing that it's looking after me, it's looking out for me. And that is creating a much more empowered experience of this particular injury that I never thought would be possible previous to knowing this work that I do now and that I'm sharing with you today. And the same really was for my polycystic ovarian syndrome lady who wanted peace, and she realized that her symptoms weren't going anywhere, and that emotional pain on top of her physical pain weren't helping. And what if, and this is what I entertained with her, and it can take a little while to get there, which is why sometimes you need a coach. I said to her, what if PCOS was not the villain of your story? Because it's definitely the backdrop, and it's the scene that you're in, the movie that you're in at the moment. You can't actually change the plot. But what if, instead of it being the villain, that it was the quest, and you are the hero of the story, and your purpose is to go through this quest so that then you can go on and help other people who are experiencing the same thing, and help create an empowering environment for them in this circumstance, which appears to be so bad, so hard, so difficult, but can actually be the quest that makes you into a better person that can then go on and serve others to do the same. it took a little bit of work for her to get there, because she kept saying, I don't want this quest. I don't want this quest. I don't want this story. I don't want this disease. I don't want this diagnosis. And I can completely understand it. I didn't want my leg pain. But there are certain circumstances we can't control them. Those thoughts, they're just not helpful. Of course your life would be better without PCOS. Of course my life would have been better without my leg issue. But it's just not helpful to think that way. So what do we need to get to a place of peace? Perhaps we're the hero of this story, where what we are facing is the quest, and that actually gives us purpose to then go on and help others, to be better versions of ourselves and stronger, and opening a portal to another dimension we never realized existed, to then to be able to serve others, to have access to the same experience. That is how I live my life day to day, and it just inspires me to wake up in the morning and be here sharing all of this with you. So that was the 5 steps of the curiosity map, which we have discussed before, but it's good to remember that your circumstances, what it is neutral. Your thoughts about your circumstance decide whether it's good or bad. Your feelings are a result of what you're thinking. They tell your body what to do and how to behave. And how you behave and show up in the world is how you experience everything in your daily life. And so can you see from this, can you realize that you have choice no matter what's happening? One last story that I want to share with you about a cancer patient that I had in one of my retreat sessions that I had a few years ago. I say cancer patient, but she wasn't at the time. She was in full remission. She had come to one of my retreats sessions. I say retreat session because it was a 1-day retreat. And so I call them retreat sessions because they happen in the space of 1 day, and we have immense transformation that happens in a small period of time. It's like an intensified transformation session that I run every couple of years or so, that I ever get a chance to jump on one. They sell out pretty quickly, but they are life-changing. And I had this one particular beautiful woman who came, and she said, when we were talking through the positivity model and the curiosity map of how we get from here to here, she said to me, I've had cancer 3 times, and I cannot see how that's a good thing. My body is failing. And my eyes and my heart just lit up when I realized that she'd had cancer 3 times and she had survived. I said to her, you've had cancer 3 times and you're still here? It hasn't beaten you. To me, my thought about that is your body is succeeding, actually. And I remember seeing the shift and the recognition in her eyes that she hadn't thought of before. She felt like continuously getting cancer was a failing on her part, and her body was betraying her in some way. Her body was failing. But the fact that it hadn't beat her, which is cancer's main objective, is to kill you, she was still here. She was in remission. She had no signs of cancer at this time in her life. She had won, and her body had succeeded. Just that subtle shift north in your thinking, using the positivity model as your compass, going through the steps of the curiosity map to get curious about this. Curiosity puts you in the place of choice, where you realize that I do have choice, and instead of choosing defeat in this particular circumstance, I can choose triumph and victory and gratitude. So, if you're going through something right now that might be heavy and difficult, and you feel like you're experiencing physical pain, which is a circumstance that you can't control, but you're now recognizing you have emotional pain on top of that that's making everything worse, you might just need some help. You might just need a coach to help you dial it down, to use a compass and a map to get you from here, where you are out of control with no power, no purpose, no peace, to over here where you are in control and you can access peace, purpose, and positivity whenever you choose. I'm always here for you. You can always contact me in the details in the description below. I hope you have a beautiful day. Remember to own your path, create your peace, and I will see you in the next video.